Hello, welcome to our channel, Colorado to Europe. Today we want to talk about why we have chosen Europe as our next destination as we leave the US.
Yeah, there are a lot of great places around the world, but we decided that Europe is probably the best fit for us. So we want to talk about a few of the reasons why that's the case for us in particular. And then within Europe, there are also a lot of options. So we wanted to talk about a few of the places that we researched more and why we ultimately settled on our current frontrunner.
One of the most important things for us is finding a country that we can move our two large dogs to more easily. There are options to get dogs from the US over to Europe. You can get a lucky seat on a cruise that has room for two large dogs. That's pretty hard to come by in the timeline that we're looking at. You can get your dogs over there on cargo. You can have a pretty expensive ticket to do a chartered flight with your animals, or you can have a dog that's small enough to put and take with you on the airplane. With two large dogs, it's not an option for us, so we're looking at options where it's going to be a shorter transatlantic flight from hopefully the East Coast to Europe, so that way they're not stuck on a plane for more than 12 hours if we can help it.
We did consider Australia and some parts of Asia early on, but because it's so difficult to get the dogs over there, we weren't comfortable with the idea of having them in a plane's cargo hold for the 16 hours or however long it would take to fly them over there. It's still not something that we're really thrilled about on the shorter flight to Europe, and we are looking at some other options that we'll talk to you about in a separate video. But if it does come down to having any of the dogs in cargo, at least then it's a little bit shorter of a flight, a non-stop flight, which is also important, and just seemed like a much more preferable choice for our situation right now.
The next thing that we wanted to find in our future destination is somewhere that has a slower pace of life and a lower cost of living. Those do kind of go hand in hand. If it's a faster pace, there's more to do, more to see, more to pay for. So we're looking to slow down and hopefully live more affordably.
While we were looking at some of the countries on our short list in Europe, we came to the conclusion that we don't necessarily want to continue our existing careers once we make our move. And something that would make that a lot easier and help us financially, especially early on, while we try to start over on that front as well, is not having to spend quite so much just to get by. So somewhere that's a lower cost of living to help us stretch our existing funds a little bit longer while we get new streams of income going was kind of a must for us as well.
We're also looking for a warmer climate. It gets pretty hot here in the summer in Colorado, but it gets a little too cold for our liking in the winter. So hopefully somewhere where the weather's a little nicer all year round, hopefully along the coast, so we can take advantage of that nice warm weather.
Yeah, while we do enjoy the world-class mountains here in Colorado, neither one of us has really done much in the way of wintertime snowy sports or activities. So it's not something that we really miss if we do move from here, but we both really like the beach, and it would be nice if it was not 2,000 miles away from us. So that wasn't really a must necessarily, but it would be a huge plus if we could go somewhere where we can have short sleeves all year and maybe play in the water a little bit. We also wanted to move somewhere where we'd be able to travel easily to other places that aren't the country that we're moving to. And while we do have a lot of places on our travel bucket list outside of Europe, Europe has a lot of the destinations that are towards the top of our list right now. So having somewhere that's kind of centrally located, or at least has easy, cheap flights all and around the continent, was also a huge must for us. And finally, we were looking for a country where the culture shock wouldn't be too severe. We were not looking for an English-speaking country necessarily, but at least a country where you can get by with English until we can learn the local language.
Yeah, it's important for us to, as we decide on where we want to stay long-term, learning language is pretty important to fitting in and finding a new home for yourself.
And regardless of where you choose to move, you should always be trying to make sure you can integrate yourself with the culture. You're not moving over there to stomp all over things. You want to go and seamlessly fit in with the local crowd.
So once we decided that Europe was where we wanted to move next, we did the obligatory Google research and YouTube research and all the social media platforms to kind of get an idea of what is it like to actually live in these countries, and use that to help us decide on the surface level. It checks those boxes that we've identified as things that we want.
So we ended up narrowing our list down to about 5 countries or so and did a little bit more research from there, try to figure out if those countries would kind of check our boxes a little bit and which ones would be best.
The first country that we decided to look into is Italy. As we mentioned before, we've been able to travel there a few times, so we know that we are comfortable there. We know a little bit of the language. We've done a little bit of travel there. Since it is centrally located, it'd be easy to go to other countries, which is something that we want to do. We know that the climate is pretty comfortable. There is some variety depending on where in Italy you are, but most of the places are still very nice. The culture, we've experienced it before and it seemed to be a good fit for us. Another thing that made Italy appealing is their opportunity for citizenship through ancestry. Some of my ancestors did come from Italy.
Unfortunately, Italy recently changed their rules regarding that citizenship by ancestry, so that was really no longer a door that was open to us. Additionally, the cost of living in some of the more desirable areas would be a little bit higher than what we'd be able to pull off without continuing our existing careers. And while we have always toyed with the idea of buying one of those fabled Euro homes and fixing it up, that also seemed like a little bit too much of a project for us to jump into on top of uprooting our lives and moving all that way. So Italy ended up not really being one of our number one choices right now. It is somewhere we might circle back to later, but for our immediate future, I don't think it's really in the cards. The next countries on our list to consider were the UK and Ireland. Again, for us, that meant an opportunity to have some citizenship by ancestry, again through Sarah's family. She's got some family that immigrated to the US from Ireland. So that was a big pro for us. Additionally, the English as a primary language would have been a huge benefit for us. We wouldn't have to learn a new language, and we wouldn't have that awkward period where we try to learn to communicate in another language as we learn it. There are also just general similarities between those countries and our life in the US, a lot of the same comforts that we're used to, availability of goods, etc. So the transition generally would have been a lot easier. And then on top of that, the options for getting dogs over there were a lot more plentiful than in other places. As we mentioned earlier, there is a cruise line that offers transport for dogs. That cruise line only offers one route, and it goes to the United Kingdom. So we wouldn't have to worry about getting them to the next spot after that, if that's the route we choose to take. There's also a few companies that charter flights, and while those are pretty expensive, they allow you to get your dog in the cabin, so they don't have to pay in cargo. And those also offer flights to that area as well. So it would have given us a lot more options to get the dogs over there in a much more comfortable manner.
And then as far as the cons, the biggest con that we saw is the cost of living, which means full-time jobs for at least one of us, probably both of us. So not the path that we want to take. Want to scale back, not move somewhere just to have another full-time job. In addition to that, there is housing issues. It is a very popular place. There's not a lot of housing left. So it didn't seem like the most advantageous option for us. Another country that we've been able to spend some time in is Portugal. So we knew that that's a culture that we have some resonance with. Very friendly people. A lot of people speak English, so that transition would be much easier, being able to get around. The climate is very comfortable. It is a coastal area. So very nice beaches. Some areas of the country, the cost of living is pretty fair. Other places are a little more expensive, but we'd be able to find a cheaper area to live or get a higher paying job and stay in one of the more expensive areas to live.
On the downside for Portugal, the cost of living is starting to go up across the country, largely driven by the expat community of retirees that's growing there. And it's become a very popular place for digital nomads. So we don't want to contribute to that problem. Another country that we were looking at is Cyprus. It has a very nice climate, being an island in the Mediterranean, and has plenty of beaches for us to hang out on and enjoy. It also has a lower cost of living by EU standards and is becoming a popular place for business owners. So if we did choose to go that route, it has some tax advantages as well. It was also occupied by Britain for a little while, so the English spoken there is pretty good, and a lot of things are signed in both Greek and English, so that transition would have been a little bit easier there as well.
The cons for Cyprus, the first one, plays off of one of the pros of island living. Since it is an island, you are restricted to entering and leaving via boat or plane. Not having additional options, more economical options like hopping on a bus and going to another country is a drawback for us. Another one is the tension between Cyprus and northern Cyprus, adding another layer of complexity to considering living in Cyprus.
The final country on our short list, and the country that we've ultimately decided to spend our time and energy on, is Albania. And Albania is a country that neither of us was very familiar with going into this process, but the more we've learned about it, the more we're really starting to get excited about it. It has a lot to offer. The number one thing that sets it apart from not only the rest of Europe, but a lot of the rest of the world, is how friendly the visa options are there. The number one part of that is the 1 year visa-free stay that you can have as an American. So that'll allow us to go over and kind of get a feel for the country before we full commit, or it can allow us to explore some of the other countries in the area. And we can get into that more when we do a deeper dive Albania video in the future. Additionally, Albania has a very low cost of living, which would allow us to live the more relaxed lifestyle that the country offers as well. Like we've mentioned a few times, we're hoping to avoid just restarting our current careers once moved, and we would like to be able to start something different and hopefully just live a slower pace of life in general. And having that lower cost of living will allow our dollar to stretch a little bit further while we figure out how we're going to supplement our income while we're over there. The climate in Albania is also exactly what we're looking for. It's right along the Adriatic Sea, so you get the nice Mediterranean climate along the coast, but it does have some big mountains, nice cooler lakes, and a lot of diversity in that sense, so we can get a break from the heat.
We're excited to learn more about Albania, and as we do so, we are also considering the potential drawbacks for that move, one of which is the transportation of our dogs. Getting from the US to Albania might include another leg to our trip. Direct access might not be available. So it would mean getting to another country and then potentially driving our dogs or another mode of transit down to Albania. Another con is the language barrier. While most of the major cities, people do speak English, we would still need to learn a new language to be able to prosper there long term. And then the last con that we see right now is the lack of train access in the country. There isn't inter-country train transit. However, they are working potentially on upgrading their existing train system that is no longer used.
So as we learn more about Albania and start to consider more what it would be like to live there, that's really what this channel is going to start to pivot to look more like. We're going to do a lot more content talking about in-depth some of the pros and cons of living in the country and what we expect will be some of the challenges and how we're going to navigate them. We also have a scouting trip planned out there in the fall, and we're going to take you with us on that. So I get to see a little bit of the country and get our feelings about what it'd be like to live there, what's the cost of living really like, are the people as friendly as everybody says, all of those questions that, you can take YouTubers' words for it, and we hope you take ours. But we'd really like to see for ourselves before we full commit to living in a new place. But if any of that sounds like something that you'd be interested in, we'd love for you to like and subscribe. If you have any thoughts or questions or comments that you want us to dig into as well and get our feelings on, please feel free to leave those below. And otherwise, we are looking forward to seeing you guys all in the future.